The storm above the valley did not move, did not roll, did not speak in thunder. It simply hovered, as if waiting. As if listening. And in that unnatural stillness, Esperanza felt the unmistakable pressure of an intelligence pressing against the world from the other side of the page. It wasn't wind that stirred the leaves. It wasn't rain that made the mud tremble. It was the unbearable sense that something long sealed had decided it no longer wanted to stay sealed. The grey field folio on the table pulsed, yes, pulsed, as though breathing. Not metaphorically. Not symbolically. Actually breathing, rising and falling, like the chest of something asleep and dreaming in a foreign rhythm. The wax sigil she'd broken earlier had regenerated, reshaping itself without heat or hands. But this time it formed a symbol she did not recognize. A serpentine line. A jagged horizon. A circle with no beginning or end. It wasn't Portuguese. It wasn't Latin. It wasn't any known alphabet. It felt older than alphabets. And then the room temperature plunged. She could see her breath. She could see its breath too, the books, mist rising from its surface as though exhaled from another climate, another century. Maybe another universe. Javier whispered, "It's responding to you." But she didn't move. Couldn't. Every instinct told her that the moment she touched the page again, something would snap loose from the invisible hinge holding reality together. The folio's edges curled inward, not from heat but from pressure, like a hand inside it was trying to push outward. Then the phrase reappeared, burned across the top margin in glowing ink. Nao foi apagado. Foi escondido. This time, letters continued forming beneath it, arranging themselves with deliberate patience. E agra, nao cua mais ficar. And now, it no longer wants to stay. A single line of ink dropped from the phrase, like a drip of black rain hitting the parchment. The table groaned. The lights hummed. The storm above the valley tilted, as though something colossal had leaned closer. And Esperanza realized the horrifying truth. The secret wasn't resisting exposure. It wasn't trying to remain buried. It was trying to escape. From the page. From history. From the cage humans had built from fear and silence. The seal wasn't there to keep people out. It was there to keep it in. Esperanza stepped back, too late. The wax sigil split open. And something beneath the parchment began to rise. The parchment did not tear in a clean line. It peeled, layer by layer, as if the page itself were shedding a skin it had worn for centuries. Underneath was not paper at all, not ink, not anything produced by human hands. It was a thin membrane, translucent, trembling, like the inner film of an egg just before it bursts. Esperanza froze. Javier backed toward the wall, whispering prayers he hadn't said since he was a child. Even the storm outside paused, holding its breath. Something moved under the membrane. Not violently. Not aggressively. But with intention, slow, deliberate, and nauseatingly aware. Like a creature deciding whether the world it was about to enter was worth the effort of emerging. The membrane expanded with each pulse. Once. Twice. A third time, bigger, slower, heavier. Not a heartbeat. Something more ancient. More patient. The glowing Portuguese letters rearranged themselves again across the margin, but this time the ink was crawling, forming the words with a sickening organic motion. A memoria não pertence a voces. Memory does not belong to you. Then. Pertencemos a ella. We belong to it. The table legs bent outward with a crack. The wood wasn't breaking from weight, it was bending away from the thing, like it was refusing to hold it. The membrane bulged again, and this time Esperanza saw something unmistakable push against it from underneath. A fingertip. Or something shaped like one. Smooth. Pale. Featureless. Pressing outward, testing the barrier. Javier let out a strangled breath. That's not human. Esperanza said nothing. Her voice was gone. What left her throat wasn't fear, it was awe. Dreadful, overpowering awe. Because she finally understood, Greyfield hadn't discovered the creature. Greyfield had found something trying to leave, and used the folio to trap it mid-transition. A prison made of narrative. A cage built from historical omission. The fingertip withdrew. The membrane shivered. Then another shape slid against the inside surface, long, jointless, gliding like a boneless limb tracing the path of an exit. The ink wrote again, violently this time, searing the words like scars. Nao Abra. Do not open. And then, beneath it. Tar Demay. Too late. The membrane snapped. Not outward. Inward, imploding with a sound like a breath being sucked back into an ancient lung. The room went black. Not dark, black, as if the absence of light itself had texture. And in that crushing silence, something finally whispered back. Wind Daughter stood inside the ring of red light. Its glow rising like heat. Pressing against her skin. Urging her to speak. The witnesses crowded closer. Shadows stretching. Faces hollow. Hungry for her answer. Her husband clutched her hand. Like a man bracing against execution. And the wooden-masked creature leaned in with that impossible, widening crack across its carved face. Choose. It repeated. A deeper darkness swelled behind the words. As if the forest itself was leaning forward to listen. Wind Daughter inhaled slowly. A breath that tasted of earth, smoke, and the weight of 5 dead men, who would never stop echoing in this moment. She looked at her husband. Really looked. And saw everything she would never give up. The way he whispered her name like a prayer. The way he steadied her rage. The way he became her world. In a world that wanted them both erased. Then she looked at the creatures. At the old magic that believed love was a flaw. And balance was worth more than 2 human hearts. And she answered. Not with a whisper. Not with hesitation. But with a voice sharp enough to cut through the ritual itself. I choose neither. The forest erupted. The ground convulsed. Trees bending backward as if struck. Birds bursting from the canopy. In panicked spirals. The witnesses staggered. Their forms flickering. Like blown-out candles. Trying to reignite. The creature's mask snapped. Down the middle. A jagged fracture. Spreading like lightning. That is not an option. It hissed. Wind Daughter stepped forward. Tomahawk raised. Eyes blazing with a fury the forest had never seen. It is now, she said. Because your math is wrong. The shadows recoiled. Confused. Offended. She continued. Each word a strike of defiance. Against the rules of ancient things. You think 5 lives taken means his life is owed. She slammed the butt of her tomahawk against the earth. The red ring flickering. You think pain can be balanced like scales of corn. The creature hissed. Splitting further. The forest demands. The forest doesn't understand. She roared. The world froze. Even the witnesses stopped flickering. Wind Daughter lifted the tomahawk over her heart. The same heart she once sliced. In a coming-of-age ritual. To swear she would never submit to any power that did not earn her respect. I will not give up my life, she said. I will not give up his. And I will not let the forest tear us apart. Because it cannot understand why I chose to fight. The creature twitched. Glitching between shapes. Its wooden mask warping. As if melting under invisible heat. You want a sacrifice? Wind Daughter whispered. Fine. She pressed the blade against her own palm. Blood pooling instantly. But you'll take it on my terms. Her husband lunged to stop her. Too late. She let her blood drip onto the glowing ring. The reaction was instant. The red circle sizzled, flared, then shattered, with a sound like shattering bone. The witnesses screamed. A layered, ancient wail, their forms twisting violently, as if burned by her defiance. Wind Daughter's blood spread across the earth. But instead of sinking, it branched, splitting into patterns, lines, shapes. That formed a symbol, older than the forest itself. The symbol of her grandmother's clan. The one the forest had no power over. The one the land still respected, even when it hated. The creature stumbled back, mask cracking into pieces. Wind Daughter stared into its hollow eyes. Take my blood, she said. But you will not take my future. Not his. Not ours. The earth pulsed. Once. Twice. As if reconsidering everything it thought it understood. The witnesses fell silent. The sky flickered from red to white to something like dawn, trying to force its way through. Then, slowly, reluctantly, the shadows began to withdraw. Not defeated, not appeased, but forced back by a sacrifice they did not expect and did not know how to judge. Wind Daughter lowered her tomahawk, bleeding but unbroken. Her husband caught her as her legs finally buckled. You didn't have to do that, he whispered. Tears ran down his face. Hot, shaking, real. She pressed her forehead to his. It's not about what I had to do, she said softly. It's about what I refused to let happen. The last witness dissolved into smoke. The masked creature crumbled into splinters of deadwood. And the forest, after what felt like a lifetime, exhaled. Dawn finally broke. A real dawn. Soft. Gold. Alive. But what came after this dawn would not be peace. The forest had withdrawn, not surrendered. And somewhere deep within the trees, a second trial was already waking. One for which neither of them were prepared. The riders spread out as they descended the slope, moving in a slow arc. A tactic meant to trap prey without letting it realize it had already been cornered. But the Cherokee woman saw the flaw immediately. A gap. Small. Temporary. But wide enough for death to pass through. She touched the earth with her fingertips, feeling its cold pulse. Her grandmother taught her that the ground remembers everything. Where blood was spilled. Where footsteps lied. And where the truth waits in silence. The truth tonight was simple. The first man who crossed the boundary of the sycamore roots would not leave alive. Her husband tried to rise. She grabbed his wrist, firm, unyielding. Live, she whispered. Let me do the part you cannot. The moment the lead rider dismounted, she moved. Not like a warrior charging into battle, but like a shadow stepping into the place where violence was already expected. The rider didn't even have time to gasp. Her tomahawk struck the side of his throat with a dull, final sound. Not a slice, not a crack, but the quiet, decisive thud of a life ending before it can protest. He dropped to his knees, eyes wide, hands grasping for a wound he couldn't stop. His horse bolted into the trees. The other four froze, stunned. Not by the death, but by who had dealt it. A woman. A native woman. A runaway's wife. Someone they had dismissed before even seeing her face. Their shock lasted 3 heartbeats. Long enough. She stepped back into the tree line, already gone. Already hunting the next. Because once the first life falls, fate changes shape. And she knew the forest would help her finish the rest. The remaining 4 riders snapped into motion. Shouting, drawing their pistols, pulling their horses into a tense circle. But the forest around them had already changed. Moments ago, it felt open. Neutral. Passive. Now it felt alive. Watching. Rooting for the woman who had spilled the first blood on its soil. The Cherokee woman moved through the underbrush with a precision no soldier could mimic. She stepped where the moss was thickest. Breathed when the wind breathed. Stopped when the branches stilled. To the riders, she was nowhere. To the woods, she was everywhere. One of the men, thin, nervous, a drifter type, spun in circles with his pistol raised. "She ain't human," he muttered. "No woman kills like that." But the leader barked back. "She's one body. We're 4. Spread out and force her into the open." They split. A mistake the trees themselves seemed to approve of. Their trunks swallowing the riders in separate shadows. The Cherokee woman tracked the jittery drifter first. He talked too much. Breathed too loud. His fear cracked the night open like a drum. She waited until he stepped over a fallen log. The same one she marked earlier as a threshold. A boundary. A trap. He leaned forward to check the ground. And in that fraction of hesitation, she dropped from the low branch above him. Her tomahawk struck his shoulder first, spinning him sideways. Then her knee slammed into his chest, forcing him down as if the forest floor itself demanded his silence. His scream never fully formed. She ended him cleanly. Not out of mercy, but out of necessity. 2 down. 3 left. Somewhere deeper in the trees, another rider shouted her name. A name he could not possibly know. A name only her tribe used. She froze. The forest froze with her. Then the voice came again, rough and mocking. "Come out, Wind Daughter. We know who you are now." But he was wrong. He only knew her name. He did not know her mission. And he had no idea that the forest had already chosen a side. And it wasn't his. The name echoed through the woods like a stone dropped into still water. Sharp, intrusive, impossible to ignore. Wind Daughter. Her tribe had given her that name when she was 9. After she survived a winter storm that killed 3 grown warriors. They said the wind listened to her. Moved for her. Warned her. But that name was sacred. Private. Nothing the outside world should have known. Especially not a slave catcher. She pressed her palm to the bark of a chestnut tree. Her breath steadied. Her heartbeat slowed. There was no room for panic. Not now. Not with her husband still hiding in the shadows behind her. "How do you know that name?" she called out. Her voice low, cold, controlled. A rustle of leaves. A footstep. Then a laugh that had no right to exist in a place so ancient. "We've been paid to bring him back," the voice replied. "But bringing you in too? That's a bonus. Some folks down the valley say a Cherokee woman with a storm name killed 2 overseers back in 31. She swallowed the memory. The one she never wanted to taste again. The riverbank. The rope. The overseer's blood washing into the reeds. That wasn't murder. That was survival. But men like these didn't bother with truth. They hunted whatever made them feel powerful. She stepped deeper into the trees, becoming part of the darkness. The rider kept talking, thinking sound made him safe. "They said you were a ghost even then. A wind that cuts. A woman who doesn't die easy." His flattery didn't distract her. But his location. That she now had. Close. Too close. She climbed the incline silently, placing each foot with surgical precision until she reached the ridge above him. He was taller than she expected. Armed with a long knife and a pistol. face half hidden by a beard that looked as mean as the man himself. He didn't see her. The forest didn't give her away. Even the wind held itself still, waiting for her command. She chose not to strike immediately. Not yet. Instead, she whispered a single word. Not to him. Not to herself. But to the forest. Now. And right on cue, a burst of wind slammed through the treetops, sending a rain of brittle branches crashing down around the rider. He spun. Startled, exposed, disoriented. And that was all she needed. Her tomahawk flew from her hand like it was part of the wind itself. It spun once, twice, then buried itself in his spine with a wet, decisive crack. He collapsed forward without a sound. 3 down. 2 left. But before she could reclaim her weapon, she heard something that chilled her deeper than any winter storm. Her husband shouting her name. Not in fear, but in warning. And behind his voice, the unmistakable click of a rifle being cocked. They thought the pit was shaping him. But beneath the surface, something older, something the overseers had no language for, was shaping itself through him. You see, a man doesn't become unstoppable because he's strong. A man becomes unstoppable when life gives him nothing left to protect except the truth he carries inside. And Solomon carried a truth they never anticipated. It began one night after the 12th fight, long after the plantation lights had dimmed, long after the gamblers had slithered back into their carriages. The pit was silent, but Solomon wasn't alone. Cruz was waiting. Not as an overseer. Not as a master. But as something far more dangerous. An observer who had started to understand what he was witnessing. He lit a lantern and lowered himself into the dirt arena, a place no owner ever stepped. The flame flickered across Solomon's face, revealing not exhaustion, but focus. A kind of interior stillness that made the air feel heavier. Do you know why they fear you? Cruz asked. Solomon didn't answer. He didn't have to. Because fear isn't created by muscle or violence. Fear is created by potential, the kind that cannot be measured, predicted, or controlled. Cruz studied him with the intensity of a scholar examining a forbidden artifact. They don't fear what you've done, he said quietly. They fear what you might become. And for the first time, someone spoke aloud the truth that had been forming like a shadow behind Solomon's mind. He wasn't just surviving the system. He was outgrowing it. That realization changes a man. It widens the silence inside him. It sharpens his instincts. It sends signals through the world that even animals can sense, because predators recognize when something greater has entered their territory. Word spread across plantations like a rumor carved into bone. There's a fighter who doesn't feel pain. There's a man whose eyes don't look at you or they look through you. There's something wrong with him. There's something right with him. By the 20th fight, men were refusing to face him. Superstition replaced courage. Owners argued, priests prayed, gamblers whispered about curses and spirits. But the pit kept calling him back. Because every empire, especially one built on domination, creates its own destroyer. Not through intention, but through arrogance. And Solomon was becoming precisely what their arrogance deserved. A man who no longer feared the dark. Because he had become it. The elders of Bell River used to say the wind carries memories. And on the night this part of the story begins, the wind didn't just blow. It shifted. Suddenly. Violently. As if something that had been asleep for centuries finally opened its eyes. The Cherokee woman, whose real name the records buried, whose legend the mountains preserved, felt that wind before anyone else. She was out near the tree line, sharpening the same tomahawk her grandmother once used in the Ohio raids. She wasn't preparing for war. She wasn't expecting blood. She was preparing for something worse. A decision. Behind her, her husband, legally a man without a name, kept glancing at the horizon. Slave catchers had been spotted near the ridge. Men paid in coin and cruelty. Men who didn't ask questions. Men who didn't negotiate. The Cherokee woman had already heard what they did to runaways when they were bored. And she knew one thing with a cold certainty. If they reached her husband, he would die before sunrise. But the wind told her they were coming faster than anyone expected. The forest went silent. Birds hid. Even the river seemed to hold its breath. And in that frozen stillness, she whispered the last calm word she would speak for days. "Tonight, I choose who lives." They appeared on the ridge at dusk. 5 silhouettes on horseback, outlined in the dying orange light like the opening scene of a story nobody survives. The slave catchers didn't ride fast. They didn't need to. Men like them moved with the confidence of wolves who had never once been denied a kill. Their coats were long, dust-colored, stiffened with old rain and older sins. Each carried iron cuffs, ropes, and the arrogance of those who believed the law itself was stitched into their shadows. From behind a fallen sycamore, the Cherokee woman watched them with the stillness of stone. Her husband crouched beside her, trembling, but not from fear. From fury. From the humiliation of knowing 5 men could decide the price of his existence. The leader of the riders, broad-shouldered, scar across the chin, lifted a spyglass. He scanned the valley with slow precision. Not searching. Hunting. "Tracks down the slope," he muttered. "We take him alive if he don't fight." He laughed then. A laugh that carried more violence than any shout. Her husband's breath caught. She pressed her hand to his chest. "Don't move," she whispered. But inside, she already knew something absolute. There would be no negotiation. No surrender. No escape. The only way out was through 5 men who had never imagined a woman. A Cherokee woman. Could rewrite the ending written for her family. As the riders advanced, their boots clinking, the tomahawk felt heavier in her hand. Not like a weapon. Like a promise. Because fate wasn't coming for her. She was coming for them. They moved fast. Not running. Not stumbling. But gliding through the trees with the rhythm of people who knew exactly how long they had. Before the world caught up. Wind Daughter led the way. Choosing paths the patrol would never notice. Through beds of soft moss. Across stone outcrops that left no tracks. Beneath fallen trunks that forced pursuers to crawl and lose time. Her husband followed close. Silent except for the tightness in his breath. Every few steps, he winced from the bruise on his jaw. The mark left by the last rider who ever dared touch him. But it wasn't the bruise that worried her. It was the sound of the forest behind them. The patrol was spreading out. Shouting distances. Breaking branches. Growing louder. Not because they were close. But because they wanted to be heard. They wanted to flush the prey. They didn't understand that the forest wasn't on their side. Wind Daughter stopped suddenly. Dropping into a crouch. Her hand moved to the dirt. Fingers grazing the soil as if reading something written beneath it. Her husband knelt beside her. "What is it?" She didn't answer. Not yet. She brushed away a layer of wet leaves. Revealing the faint outline beneath. A footprint. Small. Light. Bare. Not patrol. Not rider. Not hers. Not his. She exhaled, a single tight breath. "He's ahead of us." Her husband stiffened. "Who?" "The one who left before the patrol arrived. The one whose tracks she'd seen near the bodies. The one the crow had signaled. The watcher. The shadow. Someone who moved like a ghost. But disturbed the earth just enough for her to sense him. She stood. "We follow." Her husband hesitated. "What if it's a trap?" "It is," she said. But not his. They climbed steadily toward the ridge. The oldest part of the forest. Where the earth rose in a long stone spine. Carved long before colonists ever dreamed of claiming land. Up here, the trees grew twisted and tall, their roots gripping rock like claws, their trunks etched with markings. Older than English. Older than Cherokee. Older than memory itself. Wind Daughter remembered stories told by firelight. Stories about the ridge. About the spirits that walked it. About the ones who guarded its boundaries. Her grandmother's warnings echoed in her bones. Do not climb the ridge unless the land calls your name. But today, something stronger than a call dragged her toward it. They reached the crest just as the wind shifted again. A long, cold breath that didn't belong to weather. Her husband touched her arm. Wait. Someone's there. He was right. At the far edge of the ridge stood a figure. Still. Tall. Unmoving. Half hidden in the fog that clung to the stones like a living thing. Wind Daughter felt every hair on her arms rise. The figure wasn't patrol. Wasn't a rider. Wasn't anyone she had ever seen. Then the wind swept a veil of mist aside. Just enough to reveal what the figure was holding. A mask. Painted red and black. Carved with symbols she hadn't seen since childhood. Symbols of guardians. Symbols of warnings. Symbols of war. Her breath caught. Her grandmother once whispered about them. Men who walked between tribes. Between laws. Between worlds. Men who appeared only when the forest decided a life was worth intervening in. But the mask the figure held wasn't the part that chilled her. It was the figure's voice. Calm, hollow, ancient. When he finally spoke. Wind Daughter, he said. Speaking her sacred name the same way the wind spoke it. As if he'd known it long before she was born. Her husband took a step back. She did not. Her voice was steady when she asked. Why are you following us? The figure raised the mask slowly. The paint glinting like fresh blood. I am not following you, he said. I am here to warn you. The ridge fell silent. The trees stilled. Even the wind listened. 5 hunters died last night, he continued. But the ones coming next are not hunters. Wind Daughter felt the forest tighten around her. A question formed on her tongue. But he spoke first. They are coming because of you. A pause. Not dramatic. Final. And because of what you awakened. The earth beneath their feet shivered. This wasn't about the riders. Or the patrol. Or the valley. It was something older. Darker. Waiting beneath the soil of the ridge. And for the first time that morning, Wind Daughter felt something new. Not fear. But recognition. Something she thought she buried years ago was stirring awake. The fire was dying. Not from lack of wood. Not from wind. But from fear. As if even the flames did not want to witness what was coming. Wind Daughter sat with her back against a cedar trunk. Her tomahawk resting across her lap. Her ears tuned to every shift in the dark. Her husband slept beside her. But it was not peaceful sleep. He twitched, murmured. As if chased by shadows even in his dreams. She touched his shoulder gently. He relaxed. Just a little. But the forest? The forest stayed tense. Every leaf seemed to hold its breath. Even the insects had gone silent. No chirping. No clicking. No life. It was the kind of stillness she had only felt once before. The night her grandmother died. A soft scrape of stone on bark sounded behind her. She spun, quiet, swift. Tomahawk raised. Nothing. Just a hollow in the tree. And beyond that, more darkness. But then it came again. Not a sound. A feeling. A pressure. A presence. Like the air itself was leaning toward her. She rose slowly. The night pushed back. Her shadow stretched unnaturally long across the ground. Warping, bending. As if something else were pulling that darkness instead of the fire. Wind Daughter lifted the tomahawk higher. "I know you're there," she whispered. Her voice did not echo. It fell flat against the trees. Swallowed. That was the second sign. The third came as a whisper. Not heard with the ears. Heard with the bones. Child of iron hair. Her stomach tightened. Only one being had ever called her that. And that being had been sealed away. Long before she was born. A figure began to take shape between the trees. Not walking. Not stepping. Just forming. The outline of a tall man. But wrong. Limbs too long. Shoulders too narrow. A neck that tilted like it had once been broken. A voice slid from the darkness. 5 hunters dead in one night. The wind carried their blood to me. She steadied her breathing. Show your face. It did. A pale mask of carved wood. Cracked down the center. With nothing behind the eye holes. But hollow darkness that breathed. Her pulse kicked. This was no colonial spectre. No ghost of dead men. No vengeful soul. This was old territory magic. The kind her grandmother had warned her about. The kind that did not appear. Unless the land itself had been offended. "What do you want?" she asked. The figure tilted its wooden face. "You have taken life on sacred soil. A debt must be paid." Wind Daughter tightened her grip. "If you've come for me, then take me and leave him out of it." The wooden mask cracked wider. A sound like a tree splitting in winter. A smile. If it could be called that. "It is not you I want." Its hand, long, jointed, wrong. Pointed toward her sleeping husband. "It is the man whose life you saved." Wind Daughter stepped in front of him. "You cannot have him." The creature leaned forward. And its whisper sliced through the air like frost. "You already took 5 men to save him. How many more will you kill? Before the forest takes him back." Silence. Cold, heavy, absolute. The figure began to fade. Its wooden mask the last part to dissolve. As it vanished, it gave one final warning. "Dawn will choose. Not you." Then it was gone. And the night exhaled. As if relieved the thing had finally left. Her husband stirred behind her. "What's wrong?" he whispered, half-conscious. Wind Daughter kept staring into the darkness. "We're not alone," she said quietly. "And the forest has decided to judge us. Morning would not be a beginning. It would be a verdict. The sky should have been turning grey. Birdsong should have returned. Mist should have risen off the damp ground. In soft, living curls. But dawn didn't come. Not fully. Not naturally. The horizon glowed a sickly, muted red. As if the sun were trapped behind a wall of blooded glass. Trying and failing to rise. Wind Daughter stood. Her hand hovering over her husband's shoulder. Shaking him awake with urgency she tried to hide. "Get up," she whispered. "It's starting." His eyes opened, heavy with sleep. Then confusion. Then dread. "Why is the sky like that?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Because the forest was answering for her. The trees were trembling. Not swaying. Not bending. But shivering. Like something enormous was breathing beneath their roots. Birds burst from the canopy in frantic spirals. Only to fall silent mid-flight. And vanish into the red haze above. Her husband grabbed her wrist. "Is it the thing from last night? Is it coming back?" She scanned the tree line. Not for a shape. Not for a face. But for the absence. The places where light refused to settle. "It never left," she said. A low groan rolled through the earth. Deep as thunder. But slower. A sound of ancient weight shifting. Her husband staggered. What's happening? She steadied him. The forest is deciding your fate. But why me? His voice cracked. What did I do? Wind Daughter looked at him. Really looked at him. The man she had risked everything to protect. The man she would burn the world for. You lived, she said softly. That is always enough to anger whatever wants you dead. A crack tore through the sky. A thin white line like lightning. But silent. Unnatural. Splitting the red dawn in half. And from the crack, they emerged. Shadowed figures. Tall, thin. More suggestion than form. Stepping out of the fracture in the sky. As though the horizon had become a doorway. Her husband froze. What are those? Wind Daughter lifted her tomahawk. And whispered the old words. Her grandmother had made her memorize. But never explained. They are the witnesses, she said. The ones who come when the world needs to decide. Whether a life is owed. Or earned. The shadows moved closer. Faces invisible. Bodies unraveling and reforming. With each step, Wind Daughter pushed her husband behind her. You stay with me. His voice was barely audible. And if they choose death? Her jaw tightened. Then dawn won't be the only thing refusing to rise. The forest groaned again. Louder, angrier, expectant. The witnesses stopped only a few feet away. Their presence colder than winter water. One of them extended a hand. Bony and too long. Like the creature from the night before. But this one spoke with a voice like breaking branches. The price must be weighed. Wind Daughter raised her blade. And I will weigh it with you. The shadows shifted. Not threatening. Considering. Judging. Then a single phrase echoed through the trees. Not from the witnesses. Not from the sky. But from the earth beneath them. Begin. The judgment had started. And neither of them were ready for what it demanded. The sixth ring glowed without her touching it, pulsing like a heartbeat that wasn't hers. The spiral beneath her vibrated, each concentric circle awakening in sequence, as though the chamber itself had been waiting centuries for this exact convergence, her presence, the breach, the shadows, the remembering. Esperanza staggered to her feet. The towering shadow with antlered tendrils lowered its massive head, its voice rolling like distant thunder. Take back what you severed. What you broke. What you were. The other shadows formed a semicircle, watching her, hungry but reverent, trembling with expectation. Their whispers braided into a single, trembling refrain. Choose us? Or destroy us? The faceless figure of light stepped forward, its form flickering violently as if the chamber no longer fully tolerated its presence. Do not listen, it urged. They speak in truths twisted by their hunger. And you? Esperanza snapped. You haven't told me everything, either. A moment of silence, thick, accusing. The figure dimmed. I cannot. The shadows hissed in amusement. The sixth ring burst open with blinding light, a column of spiraling gold that tore upward, splitting the chamber in half. The pressure intensified, Esperanza felt her ribs straining, her lungs tightening. Then, another memory detonated inside her. She saw the moment she created the fracture. Saw the shadows kneeling before her, loyal, obedient, fierce. Saw the moment she realized what they would become if left unleashed. Saw herself split them, split herself, into halves, one of light, reason, and vow, the other of shadow, instinct, and hunger. Saw the sphere forged as the anchor of that separation. And saw her own face, hardened, resolute, seal away the shadows, knowing the act would erase everything she was. Esperanza collapsed, clutching her chest. The chamber blurred, swimming in streaks of black and gold. The figure of light knelt beside her. You sacrificed identity for safety. You chose forgetfulness to prevent devastation. The antlered shadow leaned in, its voice vibrating the stones. You amputated half your soul. The walls cracked again. A massive slab of obsidian crashed to the floor, narrowly missing her. Esperanza pushed herself upright, shaking. What happens if I step into the sixth ring? The light and shadow responded at the same time. The figure of light. You restore the seal. The antlered shadow. You restore yourself. Both whispered the same final warning. But once you choose, you cannot return. Esperanza stared at the blazing sixth ring. The spiral waited. The blackness wasn't empty. It had weight, like a damp wool blanket pressed against the skull. Esperanza could feel it, settling over her shoulders, sliding into her lungs, moving as though it had chosen her specifically. It wasn't darkness, it was presence. She tried to inhale. The air didn't come. Instead, something else entered, cool, thin, and threaded with a sensation like being remembered by something you've never met. Behind her, Javier gasped. Not in fear. In recognition. A small, trembling light cracked open inside the void, no bigger than a grain of rice. It glowed with a milky blue shimmer, as if lit from within by memory itself. The darkness recoiled from it, peeling back in soft, reluctant ripples. The light spoke. Not aloud, not through sound at all. It vibrated inside the bones, humming a phrase that felt older than language. Devolve oqnaoe vosso. Return what is not yours. Esperanza staggered. Her knees hit the floorboards, but the sensation came to her a moment too late, like her body's signals were being rerouted through something else. She touched her temple. Warm. Pulsing. The breath, if it could be called that, moved through her again. She understood then. This thing, this presence, wasn't emerging from the folio. It had always been here. The folio wasn't a gateway, it was a seal, a dam holding back a river of precognitive memory. And the collapse of the membrane had just opened the floodgates. Javier's voice broke through the humming. What does it want from us? The blue light flickered, dimmed, then flared brighter. The hum sharpened. Esperanza's mind filled with images that weren't hers. Mountains she never climbed. Rooms she never entered. Faces she never saw, yet somehow they felt familiar, like recollections from a life she hadn't lived. Then the humming focused into a single command. Give it back. Esperanza clutched the folio. The parchment was cold now, lifeless, drained of whatever force had been animating it moments before. The pages fluttered in her hands with a faint, papery rattle that sounded like something dying, or something freed. A long, boneless shape shifted through the darkness again, brushing her shoulder. Not touching. Guiding. The blue light drifted closer, illuminating the faint outline of a figure emerging from the dissolving void. Not monstrous. Not human. Something in between, a form shaped by the memories it carried, not by flesh. And as it leaned close enough for Esperanza to feel its breath that wasn't breath, it whispered one more time. Return the stolen future. The figure stepped fully into the half-light, and the room adjusted around it, as though reality itself shuffled to make space for something that did not belong, yet had always been here. Its outline wasn't fixed. It shifted with every slight movement, like a silhouette cast by multiple unseen suns. Esperanza did not back away. Not because she was brave, she wasn't. But because the creature's presence tugged at her with the familiarity of déjà vu stretched across lifetimes. She felt as though she had seen it once before, in a dream she never remembered having. Javier collapsed to his knees, trembling. What future? He whispered. We don't have anything that belongs to you. The creature's head tilted, not with anger, but with a patience that made the hairs rise on their arms. A soft, rippling voice filled the room, yet no sound reached their ears. The future taken from memory. The memory taken from time. The time taken from us. Esperanza understood before Javier did. The folio, the Greyfield archive, wasn't hiding the past. It was hiding a possible future. A future the archivists had glimpsed, written, trapped, and then concealed so thoroughly that even time itself forgot it. A future this thing had lived. Her hand shook around the folio. She opened it, page by trembling page, until she reached the membrane scar, the place where the creature had been held in narrative suspension. As the folio lay open, the creature extended one elongated arm. It didn't touch the page. It hovered above it, fingers dissolving into strands of faint blue light that curled downward like smoke being pulled back into a fire. Images burst across the parchment. Cities sinking beneath cold oceans. Skies split by spirals of burning stormlight. Villages rebuilt under unfamiliar stars. And humanity walking between worlds shaped by memory, not physics. Not prophecy. Not inevitability. A timeline once chosen, then stolen. The creature's whisper threaded through Esperanza's consciousness. This was ours. This was yours. And then it was buried. It stepped closer, its form shimmering. Esperanza held the folio out. For the first time, she felt it lighten in her hands, like a burden preparing to leave her. The creature reached, and the pages rose from her palms, weightless, turning white-hot and translucent. The folio folded in on itself, unraveling into strands of blue memory that wound around the creature like a cloak. Then, gently, almost gratefully, it whispered. The future returns to its witness. And with a single, soundless breath, it vanished, leaving behind only a flicker of blue light that sank into Esperanza's chest. And stayed. The room went still. The world resumed. But nothing, past, present, or future, would ever be the same again. The shaking stopped all at once. Not gradually. Not naturally. As if an unseen hand had pressed pause. On the entire world. Wind Daughter felt the silence settle around her like a noose. Her husband stood beside her, breathing hard, eyes flashing between the witnesses, and the wooden masked figure that had stepped forward to preside. Like some impossible judge, the creature's mask was worse in daylight. Cracked, warped. Its carved mouth stretched too wide, as if something inside was smiling, even though the wood wasn't meant to bend. The third question. It repeated, each syllable dropping like a stone into the dead stillness. What will you sacrifice to end this? Wind Daughter tightened her grip on the tomahawk. If you want blood. The creature cut her off. No. Not blood. Something greater. The witnesses began to hum. A low resonance. Like wind inside a cave. Vibrating the air. And shaking the leaves loose from branches. Her husband whispered. What could be greater than blood? She didn't answer. Because she knew. Her grandmother had told her the old stories. The ones other Cherokee refused to repeat. The ones that weren't about spirits. But about balance. Blood was simple. Easy. Primitive. But sacrifice? That was different. The creature raised its long, jointed arm and pointed directly at Wind Daughter. You have taken 5 lives. It said. To save one. She lifted her chin. And I would do it again. The forest hissed. Every leaf vibrating. Every root twisting beneath the soil. But the creature wasn't angered. It was intrigued. We do not seek your life. It continued. Nor his. Her husband let out a shaking breath. Relief. But Wind Daughter felt no relief. Because she knew the forest never gave mercy. Without cost. What, then, she asked. What do you want from us? The creature turned its head sharply. Like a crow examining carrion. Your future. Her stomach dropped. No. Her voice cracked. The first crack since the trial began. You can't take that. A witness drifted nearer, whispering with a voice like splitting bark. A life spared. Takes another. Another witness joined it. And another. Until a ring of flickering shadows encircled her and her husband. Your future together? They intoned. Layered voices rising in rhythm. Is the sacrifice? Her husband's voice broke. No. No, she's all I have. Take anything else. The shadows swirled violently. A cyclone of black smoke. And snapping branches. A bond sealed in blood. Must be broken to restore balance. The creature's wooden mask cracked further. Like a grotesque grin widening. You may both live. It said. But never again. As one. The world tilted. Wind Daughter felt her knees weaken. Not from fear. From rage. You want to tear us apart, she said quietly. Not for balance. For cruelty. The creature's head twitched. Amused. The forest does not understand love. Only math. Her husband grabbed her hand. A desperate clutch. As if holding her now might keep the forest from pulling them apart. The ground glowed faintly beneath their feet. A thin ring of red light. Forming a boundary. A circle of judgment. The creature spoke again. Deep, resonant, final. Choose. Wind Daughter felt her heart fracture. The options were clear. Brutally clear. 1. Sacrifice their future together. To save his life. Or 2. Refuse the sacrifice. And let the forest take him. Don't, he whispered. Tears threatening. Don't give us up. I'd rather die than lose you. She stared at him. The man she had saved. The man she had killed for. The man she had bled for. You don't understand, she whispered. I'm not losing you either way. The witnesses leaned in. As the creature raised its arms. Ready to seal whatever choice she spoke aloud. Wind Daughter lifted her chin. Eyes blazing. Voice shaking with fury and love intertwined. I choose. And the forest held its breath to hear her answer. The roar rising from the chamber wasn't sound, it was pressure, a physical force pushing against Esperanza's ribs as if trying to shove her backward, away from the spiral center. But something stronger pulled her forward. A gravity. A recognition. A memory wrapped in light and violence. She placed her foot on the first glowing ring. The chamber reacted instantly. Golden veins shot across the spiral, branching like lightning frozen mid-strike. The hum returned, not soft this time, but furious, vibrating the stone, shaking dust from the ceiling. The faceless figure stepped back, its luminous form flickering at the edges. You awaken what sleeps beneath, it warned. Esperanza didn't answer. She could barely hear it through the pounding in her skull. Images flashed behind her eyes, cities built on impossible cliffs, temples carved into the backs of living mountains, rituals performed beside oceans that reflected 2 moons instead of 1. Lives. Centuries. Knowledge she should not possess. Yet it was hers. The second ring lit. The shadows outside the chamber shrieked. The sound stabbed through the walls like rusted metal dragging across bone. They were no longer pushing. They were tearing, splintering cracks across the obsidian surface, clawing for entry. The figure's voice sharpened. They sense the remembering. They will try to stop it. Esperanza clenched her fists. What are they? What you cast out, it replied. What you fractured from yourself to bind the seal. Her breath hitched. You're telling me they're part of me. The figure did not nod. It didn't need to. The truth hit her like cold water. The third ring ignited. The chamber's light blazed upward, forming a spiraling column that wrapped around her body like a cocoon. The symbols on her skin erupted in brilliance, lifting from her flesh and orbiting her in a perfect golden helix. Each symbol carried a sensation: grief, power, rage, loss, echoes of a being she once was, a being she had sealed away to preserve two worlds. And the shadows outside knew it. They punched through the first crack. A talon made of pure blackness slammed against the inner wall, splintering the stone. Another. Another. Their shrieks layered until the chamber trembled like a beating, dying heart. The figure's presence dimmed, struggling to remain stable. "You must decide now," it said. "To restore what you were, or destroy what remains." Esperanza lifted her foot over the fourth ring. Every shadow outside screamed her name. The moment Esperanza's foot descended toward the fourth ring, the chamber convulsed, so violently she nearly lost her balance. The golden column around her fractured into shards of spinning light, each piece vibrating with an energy that felt older than language. The seal beneath her feet pulsed once, twice, then drew in a breath like a living creature waking from centuries of paralysis. The shadows outside sensed it. They tore into the chamber wall with newfound frenzy, ripping through obsidian like it was rotted parchment. A second talon speared through, longer than her arm, dripping strands of black smoke that hissed when they touched the light surrounding her. The crack widened, revealing a mass of writhing darkness behind it, like a storm made of teeth and wings. The figure of light flickered, its outline collapsing inward. "They are the hunger you severed," it warned. "The half you refused to carry." Esperanza swallowed hard. "I didn't choose any of this." "Once, you did." The fourth ring ignited. A column of white gold fire erupted upward, swirling around her legs, her torso, her throat. She gasped as the flames etched themselves into her skin, forming swirling patterns that matched the murals on the chamber walls, the same markings worn by the jade-braided woman. A second memory detonated behind her eyes. She saw herself, or the version of herself she once was, leading a procession across a cliffside bridge carved from living crystal. People knelt as she passed, not in worship, but in fear. She had not been a guardian. She had been a weapon. The memory vanished with a painful snap, leaving her breathless. The shadows roared. They ripped open the chamber wall fully, flooding in like a tidal wave of smoke. Dozens of luminous eyes blinked at her. Mouths opened across their shifting bodies, too many mouths, each whispering in a voice that sounded disturbingly like her own. "Let us in. Let us return. You are incomplete." One shadow darted forward, breaking through the chamber's light barrier and lunging toward her chest. Esperanza reacted instinctively, raising her hand. A blast of golden force exploded from her palm, obliterating the creature instantly. She stared at her hand in disbelief. The figure of light steadied, its form sharpening. "You are remembering," it said. "But memory without choice is only a chain." Esperanza lifted her foot. The fifth ring waited. The shadow screamed. And the chamber lights dimmed to a single, trembling glow. The light trembling beneath the fifth ring flickered like a candle caught in a storm. Esperanza hovered her foot above it, her breath shallow, her pulse thunderous. Every instinct screamed for her to step back, to flee the chamber, the shadows, the truth clawing its way into her bones. But the shadows did not give her space to doubt. They poured through the breach in the wall, filling the chamber like a rising tide of living ink. Dozens of formless bodies rippled up the walls and across the ceiling, their many eyes blinking in unnatural unison. Their whispers thickened the air. "Rejoin us. Remember us. You are ours." Esperanza clenched her fists, feeling the burn of the markings etched into her skin. The symbols pulsed, answering the shadows with a low, resonant hum. The golden flames twisting around her spine intensified, rising like a second skeleton made of light. She stepped into the fifth ring. The chamber reacted violently. Light shot upward through the spiral, blasting into the ceiling and ripping through the darkness like a vertical sunrise. The shadows recoiled, writhing and shrieking as the radiance peeled back pieces of their bodies, exposing the raw emptiness beneath. The faceless figure of light staggered backward, barely holding its form. "What is happening to me?" Esperanza gasped. "You are waking," it answered. "And waking has consequences." The fifth ring glowed brighter, and Esperanza felt something tear inside her, not a wound, but a veil. A membrane breaking. A seal dissolving. A memory surged through her so violently she fell to one knee. She saw herself on a battlefield of black sand, shadows bowing before her as she lifted the obsidian sphere high above her head. Her voice, deeper, colder, commanded them. They obeyed. She had been their leader, not their victim. Her stomach twisted. "No. I can't be that. I wouldn't." "You were not born her," the figure said gently. "But you became her, once. To save your world." The shadows hissed. A larger one approached, massive, towering, crowned with tendrils like smoke-forged antlers. Its eyes burned with recognition. "You carried us," it rumbled. "You punished us. Then you sealed us away." Esperanza trembled as the creature bowed to her. Queen of the Fractured. The title slammed into her like a blow. The chamber cracked. The shadows surged. And Esperanza realized the sixth ring was beginning to glow on it. Listen closely, because the next 8 seconds will decide the kind of man you become. They once whispered about a fighter buried in the archives of the Old South, a man so lethal the plantation elite recorded his kills as inventory losses. Not murders. Not tragedies. Just numbers on a ledger. 70 bodies. All broken by his bare hands. And you were never meant to hear his name. But you're here. And that means you're already in deeper than most. Because the story you're about to step into wasn't just hidden. It was engineered to vanish. Picture it, a cold room in Charleston, the air thick with ink and the stench of rotting power. A clerk, steady hand, disciplined mind, writes a single line after every fight, body disposed of in accordance with standard procedure. No sorrow. No hesitation. Just routine. A mechanical acknowledgement that another man, another life, had been erased to satisfy the appetites of those who shaped the world behind closed doors. The wealthy families who funded those fights are the same names carved into courthouses, banks, and universities today. Their legacy is painted as culture, refinement, prestige. But in truth, it was built on pits carved into the ground like open mouths waiting to swallow men whole. This is the part history books refuse to touch. The part respectable society buries beneath polished speeches and marble statues. Because if you knew what really happened, you might start questioning what else they've hidden. And that's exactly why you need to hear this. You see, every empire, ancient or modern, builds its power not on truth, but on control. Psychological control. Narrative control. Moral control. They don't just shape history, they shape what you're allowed to remember. But once in a generation, a story escapes its cage. A story like the man they called the Reaper of the Pines, a fighter molded not by training, but by brutality, not by technique, but by sheer survival instinct sharpened into something unnatural. Men came at him with chains, hooks, clubs, didn't matter. He walked out of the pit every time. They walked out never. This isn't entertainment. This isn't a legend. This is the truth beneath the truth, where power stops pretending to be civilized. And if you keep going, you're not just watching a story. You're stepping into forbidden territory, the kind that rewires a man once he hears it. You want the next step down the tunnel? Then listen closely, because after the first death, the night itself seemed to recoil. Men who arrived smug and polished now shifted in their seats, suddenly aware that the violence they'd unleashed wasn't entertainment, it was awakening something ancient, something that didn't belong to them. And at the center of it stood a man they still believed they controlled. Solomon. The plantation owners had seen big men before. They'd purchased muscle, broken muscle, reshaped muscle. But they had never seen a man who absorbed violence the way others absorb breath. There was no hesitation in him, no tremor of conscience, no plea for mercy, only a silence so deep it felt like looking into a well with no bottom. That silence unsettled them more than the blood. Because silence is where transformation hides. Cruz noticed it first. Not the strength, that was expected. Not the discipline, that could be beaten into any man. What unsettled Cruz was the calm. The eerie, mathematical calm of a man who had begun to understand the truth of his environment. That survival was a code. That the world around him was built on illusions. That every system, plantation, pit, law, ledger, depended on him remaining unaware of his own power. But power isn't given. It's recognized. And Cruz saw in Solomon the one thing slave masters never want an enslaved mind to discover, a man who has detached from fear. It wasn't rebellion. Not yet. It wasn't anger. That would have been easier to control. It was clarity. A clarity that makes simple men nervous and makes powerful men dangerous. Because when a man stops fearing death, he becomes the one thing every institution, past or present, cannot contain. Unpredictable. In the weeks that followed, spectators began arriving not to watch a fight, but to witness the mystery of the man who refused to break. Plantation owners who prided themselves on being masters of human behavior whispered to each other. How does he not fear them? How does he not hesitate? What did the boy become? They didn't realize they were asking the wrong question. The question was never what Solomon had become, but what they had created. A weapon. A symbol. A mirror that reflected their own corruption back at them so clearly they had to call it entertainment to keep from seeing the truth. And the deeper he descended into the pit, the more he understood the forbidden reality that would eventually destroy them all. You cannot own a man who has already died once inside himself, and returned. The chamber groaned as the sixth ring's light intensified, its glow no longer steady but trembling, like something trapped beneath it was struggling to break free. Esperanza steadied herself against the spiraling floor, sweat sliding down her temple, her heartbeat sinking with the violent pulse of the seal. Everything, light, shadow, memory, converged here. The faceless figure of light stepped between her and the ring, its form thinning like smoke in wind. If you restore the seal, it said, voice strained, the shadows will remain exiled. You will remain who you are now. Human. Separate. Safe. Safe. The shadows rasped in unison. Safe from truth. The antlered shadow surged forward, towering above them both. Its body contorted with a grotesque elegance, smoke limbs unfurling like wings. If you step in, it rumbled, you reclaim the part of yourself that was cut away. You become whole. You become what you were meant to be. And what is that? Esperanza demanded. Both answered at once. The light. A guardian. The shadow. A sovereign. A crack split across the chamber floor, slicing the spiral like a lightning scar. The entire structure tilted slightly, dust raining from above. The shadows pressed closer, the air tightening with their hunger. Esperanza felt the markings on her skin heat again, no longer burning but calling, tugging her toward the center of the spiral. Toward the sixth ring. Her breath shuddered. Those memories, were they visions? Or truth? Had she truly commanded the shadows once? Had she truly carved away half her essence to cage them? Was she the architect of both worlds' precarious balance? The light figure placed a fragile hand on her shoulder. You were not meant to bear that burden again. The antlered shadow leaned so close she felt its cold breath ripple her hair. You were meant to finish what you began. A tremor split the ceiling. A flood of smaller shadows poured into the chamber like black rain, spiraling overhead, shrieking her old name, the name she didn't yet know. She clasped her head as the voices drilled through her skull. The sixth ring flared, brighter than the sun. Esperanza staggered forward, her foot hovering inches away from it. A gravitational pull gripped her chest. Her choice pressed in from all sides, crushing, inevitable. Light behind her. Shadows before her. History beneath her feet. And the sixth ring called her by the name she once carried like a crown. The sixth ring's brilliance swelled until it was no longer light but a presence, alive, aware, reaching for her. Esperanza's breath hitched as the radiance curled around her ankles like spectral hands, urging her inward. The shadows recoiled and advanced at the same time, torn between reverence and desperation. The chamber floor buckled, the spiral shifting as if adjusting to her weight. The air turned electric. The markings on her skin began to rise again, lifting from her flesh as golden embers, orbiting her like a swarm of fireflies caught in a cyclone. The light figure strained to keep its form intact. If you step inside, you awaken the full memory. There will be no unlearning. The antlered shadow countered, its voice a merciless thunder. If you step away, the fracture widens. Both realms will devour each other. A jagged crack split the wall behind them. For a heartbeat, Esperanza saw beyond the chamber, into something vast and starless. A void swirling with broken timelines and collapsing geographies, a storm of lost histories and creatures made of shimmering bone. The fracture. It was no longer theoretical. No longer contained. It was opening. Her pulse hammered in her ears. This was my doing, all of it. Yes, the shadow whispered. Because you were the only one powerful enough to break the world, and the only one who could save it. Esperanza staggered as another memory stabbed through her, herself standing above a colossal chasm, shadows kneeling at her feet, light spiraling from her palms as she tore her essence apart. A sacrifice made not out of nobility, but out of terror. Not fear of the shadows. Fear of what she was becoming. She gasped. I wasn't a guardian or a queen. I was something worse. The light figure's voice softened, barely holding shape. You were necessary. The shadows whispered like wind through a graveyard. You were inevitable. The ceiling ruptured. A torrent of void light burst downward, ripping a vortex of shadows into the chamber. The spiral beneath her feet blazed brighter, resisting the collapse by sheer will, its rings vibrating like a drumskin stretched too thin. Esperanza stumbled as the pull of the fracture grew stronger, dragging everything toward the breach, threatening to swallow the chamber whole. The sixth ring pulsed again. Not a call. A demand. Her foot lowered, half by choice, half by destiny. Shadows screamed. Light flickered. The chamber cracked open. And Esperanza stepped into the ring. Her husband's voice tore through the trees. Raw, terrified, urgent. Behind you. She spun, but the sound that followed was faster than any human reflex. The metallic snap of a rifle hammer striking forward. The violent cough of gunpowder igniting. The crack that splits the night in two. For a heartbeat, she felt nothing. No pain. No heat. Just the cold realization that this might be the moment the world finally caught her. But the wind. The wind she was named for. Lashed sideways at the perfect instant, slamming a curtain of leaves across the shooter's line of sight. The bullet missed her head by an inch. Whistling past her cheek and burying itself in the trunk of an oak so hard the bark exploded. She dove behind a fallen log, rolling through dirt and roots as another shot rang out. This one closer, tighter, furious. 2 riflemen. The last 2 riders. And unlike the others, these were professionals. Her husband was still shouting. But she couldn't make out the words anymore. The gunfire was too loud. The danger too close. She crawled to a hollow in the earth. Her breath harsh in her chest as she peeked over the ridge. There they were. One kneeling, steady, methodical. The other flanking wide, moving like a man who'd hunted humans his entire life. They worked as one. Silent. Deadly. Predictable only to each other. Not to her. The kneeling rifleman fired again. The muzzle flashed briefly, illuminating his face. A scar under one eye. Jaw clenched. The expression of someone who enjoyed the chase. The bullet hit the log inches from her hand. splintering wood into her skin. She didn't flinch. She was calculating. Waiting. Reading the rhythm between the two shooters like a drumbeat. Fire. Shift. Reload. Flank. Fire. Shift. Reload. But then a new sound cut through the pattern. A sound she wasn't prepared for. Her husband, no longer hiding. No longer waiting to be protected. Charged out from the shadows with a broken branch as a weapon. "Eno," she screamed. But too late. The flanking rifleman swung his barrel toward him. Not to shoot, but to strike. To knock him down and bind him. Her husband stumbled. Fell. The branch flying from his hands. The kneeling shooter rose to his feet. Shifting his aim toward the man she had sworn to protect with her life. She felt something ancient ignite in her chest. Older than anger. Older than fear. Older than the forest itself. Not rage. Not instinct. Purpose. She vaulted over the log, sprinting full speed down the slope. Not caring about bullets. Branches. Or death. And as the rifleman's finger tightened on the trigger, she let out a sound that wasn't a scream, but a command the wind obeyed. Move! A sudden gust blasted through the clearing, throwing dust, leaves, and pine needles into a violent spiral. The rifleman flinched. Just 1 second. But 1 second was all she would ever need. Her feet left the ground. Her hand reached for her second blade. The night split open. Because this wasn't a fight anymore. This was the moment she rewrote fate. She hit the slope like a storm. Feet barely touching the earth. Air roaring around her as if the wind itself had become her armor. The kneeling rifleman recovered first. He steadied his aim. Jaw tightening. Eyes narrowing with the cold focus of a man who had ended hundreds of lives and forgotten every one of them. But tonight he was facing someone the world had misjudged from the moment she drew her first breath. Wind Daughter did not slow. She accelerated. The shot exploded from his rifle. A thunderous flash. A burst of heat. But she had already moved left. Twisting low. Sliding across the dirt in a burst of broken leaves. The bullet tore open the space she had just been in. She surged upward. Her second blade, shorter than her tomahawk. Sharper than any tool meant for survival. Glinting with the pale sheen of moonlight. Before he could reload. Before he could blink. The blade slashed across his forearm. Severing muscle so cleanly his hand went limp around the rifle. He screamed. Not in pain. But in disbelief. Men like him didn't believe in losing. Certainly not to a woman. Certainly not to a native woman. Certainly not to someone he had been taught to see as prey. He reached for his knife. She drove her knee into his throat. He fell back choking. Eyes bulging. Hands clawing at air that no longer belonged to him. She ended him with a single downward strike. Quick. Final. Necessary. For down. One left. The last rider, the one who had flanked. The one who had struck her husband. Grabbed her husband by the collar and dragged him backward. Pressing the cold barrel of a revolver to his jaw. Stop, he barked. Or I'll kill him where he stands. Her momentum halted. Her blade hung at her side. Her chest heaved. The forest quieted. Waiting. The rider didn't move his gun. Didn't blink. He was breathing hard. Face streaked with sweat and dirt. Hand shaking, but not from fear. From fury. You should have stayed hidden, he snarled. Could have saved yourself. Could have saved him. Her husband's eyes met hers. Not pleading. Not begging. But trusting. Utterly. Completely. The rider pressed the gun harder against his jaw, grinning with yellowed teeth. "Drop the blade," he ordered. "Slow." She did. Deliberately, letting the metal fall into the leaves with a soft thud. Then she lifted both hands. Empty. Calm. Still. "Good," he hissed. "Now back up." She stepped backward once. Twice. He shifted slightly to adjust his aim. And in that tiny movement, that tiny lapse, the wind shifted behind him. Not a breeze. A push. A force. Just enough. Her husband twisted. A desperate, perfect motion. And slammed his head back into the rider's chin. The rider stumbled. His grip loosened. The gun slipped. And Wind Daughter moved. Fast as lightning. Silent as breath. She grabbed the fallen revolver. Spun with impossible precision. And fired a single shot. The rider jerked. Stunned. Eyes wide. Then collapsed onto the forest floor. 5 men came into the woods that night. None would leave. The forest exhaled. The wind calmed. Her husband fell into her arms. But even as she held him, she felt the truth rising like the dawn. This victory wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous. Because killing slave catchers was one thing. But surviving the consequences? That would require a new kind of war. The scream didn't sound like it came from Esperanza's throat. It tore out of her like a century-old echo finally escaping confinement. The light erupting from the cracked sphere swallowed everything, the shoreline, the warriors, the jade-braided woman, until only the blinding brilliance remained, pressing against her skin like a second, hotter sun. Then the light condensed. Focused. It surged forward and struck her square in the chest. Her body convulsed. Memories, no, leashes, snapped inside her mind. She felt something ancient uncoil, stretching limbs that had been dormant for generations. She clawed at the sand, but she could no longer feel her fingers. The world dissolved again, but this time, it wasn't a void. It was a corridor. Endless. Narrow. Built from walls of shifting symbols that rearranged themselves every time she blinked. They weren't written text, they were living ideograms, crawling like metallic insects, rearranging themselves into ever-evolving patterns. She tried to run. She couldn't. The corridor moved for her, pulling her forward with long, deliberate strides she didn't choose. Her breath hitched as scenes began to appear on either side of her like windows into buried centuries. On her left, the burning city made of basalt architecture, collapsing under the weight of winged shadows. On her right, a council of elders wearing masks carved from whale bone, chanting in unison over a child whose eyes glowed the same color as the sphere. Then, her own face. Reflected in a window that wasn't a window. Older. Hardened. Wearing clothing she had never seen. Standing in front of a crowd that bowed to her. She staggered back, but the corridor didn't slow. A voice rose, familiar, but impossible. You have returned to the path you abandoned. Esperanza spun, searching for the source. Nothing but shifting walls. Who are you? She demanded, though fear had already given her the answer she didn't want to admit. You know what you were, the voice replied. And what they made you forget. The corridor's floor cracked beneath her feet, revealing a glowing river of molten silver. The symbols on the walls detached themselves and drifted toward her like fireflies. One landed on her wrist. It tattooed itself into her skin with a burning sting. Another landed on her collarbone. Another on her cheek. She screamed again, not from pain, but from recognition. She had seen these markings before. On the jade-braided woman. On the ancient murals she studied. On the artifacts' diagrams. The symbols were not attacking her. They were restoring her. And somewhere in the blinding whiteness ahead, the corridor opened into a chamber she remembered from a dream she had once dismissed as impossible. The corridor released her abruptly, as if deciding she was finally worthy, or finally prepared, to face what waited beyond. Esperanza stumbled into the chamber, her breath catching in her throat as she recognized the impossible. She had seen this room before. Not in research. Not in archives. Not in dreams. In vision she used to chalk up to stress and overwork, fleeting flashes that came in childhood, moments she never dared tell anyone, walls of obsidian glass, a ceiling shaped like an inverted bowl, a floor carved with a spiral so deep it seemed bottomless. A place that did not belong to any known geography. A place that shouldn't exist at all. Yet here it stood, solid and waiting. The chamber's air vibrated with a low hum, like distant thunder looping on itself. The spiral in the floor glowed faintly, as if reacting to her presence. Every symbol burned into her skin, pulsed in unison, syncing with the chamber's heart. She stepped forward. The moment her foot touched the spiral's edge, the hum stopped. Silence slammed down like a falling stone. Then, slowly, deliberately, the chamber illuminated itself. Lines of gold light crawled across the walls, forming constellations that twisted into shapes barely recognizable as human. She watched, hypnotized, as they traced scenes, migrations, ruptures, ceremonies, and something darker. A betrayal depicted in jagged strokes, figures turning on one of their own. At the center of every scene was a woman. Hair braided with jade. Eyes burning like twin stars. Esperanza's pulse stuttered. The mural shifted, and the woman's face morphed, slowly, decisively, into hers. "No," she whispered, backing away. The chamber disagreed. The floor erupted with a sudden beam of light, and a towering shape assembled from the brilliance, familiar in form, faceless in detail. The same presence she had encountered in the void corridor, now manifesting fully before her. "You were the keeper," it said. "The one who sealed the first fracture." Esperanza trembled. "I don't remember any of this." "That is why you were brought back." The figure extended an arm of swirling light. "And why they fear you." A tremor shook the chamber. The walls flickered, and for a moment, the briefest moment, she saw something past them. A storm of shadows pressing inward, dozens, hundreds, their forms distorted as if made from smoke and teeth. Trying to break through. Trying to reach her. "Your return reopens what was closed," the figure said. "You must choose. Restore the seal, or let the fracture consume both worlds." Esperanza stepped toward the center of the spiral. The chamber roared to life. When the sun finally rose, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like a warning. The forest was still. Too still. The kind of silence that settles after violence. When even the birds stay hidden. As if the trees themselves are whispering. Something has changed. Wind Daughter stood over the 5 bodies. Her tomahawk wet. Her blade nicked. Her breath slow and sharp in the morning cold. Her husband sat beside the creek. Washing blood from his face. None of it his. All of it from the men who had believed he belonged to them. He looked up at her. Eyes full of awe. Fear. Gratitude. And something deeper. Something wordless. "You saved me," he whispered. She shook her head slowly. "I kept a promise." But even as she said the words, she felt a tightening in her chest. A shadow that hadn't been there before. Killing slave catchers wasn't unheard of. But killing 5 armed men. All licensed. All connected. That would spread through the colonies like wildfire. There would be investigations. Rewards. Accusations. Posses formed. Rumors twisted. And in every version of that rumor, the villain would be the same. A Cherokee woman with wind at her back. And blood on her hands. Her husband approached her. Placing a hand on her shoulder. Gentle, grounding, familiar. "We can run," he said. We've done it before. We can hide in the mountains. Move west. Keep going until no one remembers our faces. She looked at him. Long. Steady. Unmoving. No, she said. I will not spend my life running from men who think they own the world. He exhaled. Not in relief. Not in fear. But in understanding. Then what do we do? She pointed toward the ridge, where the rising sun cast a long red line across the horizon. We go to the only place where the law doesn't reach. He frowned. The old territory. She nodded. Her grandmother's land. Land the colonists feared. Land where old alliances still slept beneath moss and stone. If they want to hunt us, she said quietly, then we choose the ground they bleed on. But before they could leave, before they could take one step toward safety, a crow landed on a low branch, its feathers bristling, its eyes fixed on the bodies. Crows never arrived this early. Never alone. Wind Daughter's spine tightened. The bird let out a single harsh cry. A sound not meant for nature. A warning. A message. A signal. Her husband stiffened. What does it mean? She swallowed. The forest isn't done with us. Something old woke last night. And it's watching. The crow cried again. Deep, echoing, unnatural. Then more cries answered it. From deeper within the trees. Not birds. Not animals. Voices. Human voices. Approaching fast. The consequences were not days away. They were minutes away. And now the real story was beginning. The voices in the forest were getting closer. Too many. Too coordinated. Moving with the kind of purpose that only comes when men already know what they're looking for. Wind Daughter pulled her husband into the shadow of a cedar tree. Both of them lowering their breath. Their bodies becoming still. Their senses stretching thin like wire. The crow on the branch snapped its beak sharply. Once, twice. As if confirming what she already feared. The forest had carried the sound of the gunshots farther than she intended. And it hadn't carried them to friends. The undergrowth rustled. Branches cracked. Boots sank into soft earth. Not 5. Not 10. More. A small armed party. Moving with the authority of men who believed the law followed behind them like a dog. She counted the rhythm of steps. Heavy, military. Not the lazy amble of hunters or drunk locals. These were men who'd seen violence before and expected to see it again. Her husband whispered. Militia? She listened harder. One man barked an order. Spread out. Look for tracks. Bodies first. Another replied. If it's the Cherokee woman they warned us about, don't get close. She's. His words were swallowed by the crunch of boots. But she didn't need the rest. She knew exactly what he was about to say. The men emerged into the clearing. Their rifles gleamed in the morning light. Their jackets carried the insignia of the local patrol. Half deputies. Half bounty hunters. All dangerous. One knelt beside the first dead rider. And swore under his breath. Tomahawk wound, he muttered. Deep. Clean. Whoever did this knew exactly where to strike. Another kicked the body with the callousness of habit. Man hired by Bell's Landing. Big money. Whoever killed him's gonna bring a storm down on this whole valley. The leader, broad, bearded, eye sharp as broken glass. Crouched near the second corpse. His voice dropped. This wasn't rage, he said. This was skill. Wind Daughter's heart slowed. Controlled. She knew what came next. Men like these always followed the same logic. Violence this precise meant a threat worth chasing. And a threat worth chasing meant a bounty worth raising. The leader straightened. Fan out. Look for footprints. Blood trails. If they're wounded, they won't get far. Another man snorted. You think it was more than one attacker? The leader paused, studying the wounds. The angles. The placement. No, he said darkly. It was one. The clearing went silent. Even the crows seemed to listen. One person, he repeated. And if the rumors are true? He looked toward the tree line where she was hiding, as if he could feel the weight of her gaze. She's not finished. Her husband leaned close, whispering. We have to move. Now. But she didn't reply. Because she saw something the patrolman did not. A sixth set of footprints in the mud. Very faint. Very fresh. Leading away from the clearing. Someone else had arrived before the patrol. Someone who watched everything. Someone who left without disturbing a single bird. The wind brushed her cheek. Soft, warning. We're not alone, she murmured. Her husband tensed. Who? She tightened her grip on the tomahawk. I don't know. But the unease in her bones told her one thing with certainty. The forest had awakened more than memories last night. It had awakened witnesses. Hunters. Old powers that didn't belong to colonists. Or tribes. Or even to the realm of the living. The patrol captain raised his voice again. Tracks. Heading east toward the old ridge. Men began moving. Fast. Determined. Armed. Wind Daughter grabbed her husband's wrist. Her voice was low, fierce, unshaken. We leave now. Before the forest decides who it wants more. And together. They vanished into the trees. As the patrol spread out behind them. Like a second wave of fate. The hunt had begun. And this time. It was the entire valley chasing them. The night pressed against the cabin walls like something alive, thick, watching, listening. Esperanza felt it before she heard it, a shift in the floorboards, a breath that didn't belong to her, a presence that carried the cold weight of memory. The grey notebook, the one she had sworn she would never open again, lay on the table, pages fluttering as if stirred by an unseen hand. She knew what this meant. The archive was waking up. And not just the digital one, the ancestral one. Across the room, the lantern dimmed, then flared, casting long, warped shadows that began to stretch, bend, and tremble. Her pulse hammered. The shadows were not random this time. They were forming shapes, 3 shapes, each with a familiar silhouette she had seen only once before, deep in the forbidden pages of the Greyfield file. The triad of witnesses. Not human. Not entirely myth. The guardians of memory that should never resurface. She whispered a warning to herself, do not acknowledge them. Do not let them know you see. But it was too late. The tallest shadow, its head crowned with the symbol carved into the Santa Maria's hull, turned toward her with slow, deliberate intent. It knew. It had always known. A low hum vibrated through the air, rattling every glass, every nail, every bone inside her. Then the cabin walls changed. Not literally, no wood shifted or broke, but visually, they dissolved. Melted into a new scene. A memory that was not hers. She was suddenly standing inside a vast stone hall dripping with condensation, torches arranged in a perfect spiral along the floor. Figures in hooded cloaks formed a circle around a raised slab of dark marble. On it lay something wrapped in linen, small, fragile, unmistakably human. A child. A sacrifice. Her breath froze. She knew this ritual. It was the one Greyfield hinted at but never fully explained, the ritual of the borrowed soul. A ceremony meant to extract a lineage's memory and merge it with another, forcibly. One of the hooded figures stepped forward and lifted a blade engraved with the same symbol that scarred the notebook. We begin, he whispered. But the voice that echoed through the hall did not belong to him. It belonged to Esperanza. And she had never said those words in her life. Her vision snapped back to the cabin, except now the shadows were closer, reaching. The shadows' hands, if they could even be called hands, unfolded like ink spreading underwater, slow but certain, each tendril moving with the confidence of something that had crossed into this world many times before and feared nothing in it. Esperanza stumbled back, her heel catching on the wooden step, the lantern flickering violently as if suffocating in their presence. "Not again," she whispered. But the room disagreed. The notebook on the table snapped shut with a sound like a bone breaking. Then it opened again, on a page she didn't remember writing, filled with a script she didn't know how to form, yet unmistakably written in her handwriting. A single sentence pulsed on the paper as if breathing. "You have already been here." Her heart dropped. The shadows froze, as if waiting for her reaction. Esperanza reached out, hesitantly, foolishly, and her fingertips brushed the ink. The moment she touched it, the cabin dissolved around her in a violent burst of white. She wasn't in the stone hall anymore. She wasn't in any place that obeyed the logic of structures or walls. She was suspended in a vast, starless void, lit only by thin, winding streams of glowing memory, silver threads stretching into infinity. Each thread vibrated with whispers, languages she recognized from her research, and others she had never heard spoken by any living people. The air tasted metallic. Heavy. Ancient. A voice rose from behind her, not from her throat but from everywhere. "You were chosen because you remember." Esperanza turned, but there was no figure. Only a shape assembling itself out of dust and light, a tall, featureless form like a statue half-formed from smoke. Its presence pressed against her chest, making it hard to breathe. "You carry what was stolen," it said. "And what must be returned." Her mind raced. Returned to whom? Returned how? But the void did not answer. Instead, it shifted again, pulling her downward into a whirlpool of memories not her own. She landed on sand. Blinding sun. A shoreline stretching endlessly. The distant sound of drums, slow, deliberate, echoing across the water. She stood among dozens of figures wearing ceremonial paint, arranged in a formation that mirrored the spiral torches she saw in the stone hall. At the center stood a woman with braids decorated in shards of jade, her eyes fixed directly on Esperanza, as if she had been waiting centuries for this exact moment. "You arrived later than promised," the woman said. Esperanza's blood ran cold. She knew her name. Esperanza froze, not because of fear, but because something deeper, older, moved inside her at the woman's words. The jade-braided figure stepped closer, her bare feet silent on the sand, her posture regal and terrible at the same time. The painted warriors surrounding her did not blink, did not breathe, did not acknowledge Esperanza's sudden arrival. They stood like carved obsidian statues awaiting a signal. "I know you," the woman said, not with curiosity but with certainty. "Even if you no longer know yourself." Esperanza opened her mouth to speak, but the air tightened, thick as resin. The woman raised a hand, and the entire shoreline seemed to hold its breath. "You carry a fracture," she continued. "One made long before your birth, yet etched into your marrow." The words struck something inside Esperanza, a pressure she'd always mistaken for anxiety or intuition. Suddenly it pulsed, alive and answering the woman's voice. She staggered forward and caught herself, sun shifting under her palms. The drums in the distance quickened, their rhythm syncing with her heartbeat. What is this place?" Esperanza finally managed. The woman's jade fragments glimmered under the sun. "A memory you abandoned. A pact you broke. And a debt you were always destined to repay." The sand beneath them darkened, rippling outward in a perfect circle. It wasn't water. It was shadow, moving with intention, responding to the woman's presence. The warriors surrounding them lifted their faces toward the sky in unison. Their eyes reflected something Esperanza couldn't see, something towering above her. Then the woman spoke with a tone that reverberated through the bones of the earth. "Bring it." The shadow circle rose, forming a column of smoke. Inside it, something glowed, pulsing red like a heart beating in slow motion. When the column collapsed, an object remained on the sand, a small, perfectly smooth sphere carved from black stone, etched with delicate silver lines that spiraled like constellations. Esperanza recognized it instantly. The artifact from the sealed Greyfield dossier. The one that was supposed to have been destroyed in 1543. "You cannot hold both worlds apart forever," the woman said. "Your blood remembers what your mind denies." Esperanza stepped backward as the sphere vibrated, each pulse sinking with her chest until her heart wasn't beating on its own anymore. Something else was controlling the rhythm. "You brought the fracture with you," the woman said softly. "Now you must decide whether to close it or widen it." The sphere split with a sound like tearing fabric. Light poured out. And Esperanza screamed. The word "begin" did not echo. It vibrated. Through the soil. Through their bones. Through the breath frozen in their throats. The witnesses stood in a curve around them. Shadows flickering like candle flames. In a wind that didn't exist. Wind Daughter felt the weight settle in her chest. An ancient pressure. A demand older than any tribe. Any colony. Any nation. Her husband whispered. "What do they want us to do?" She swallowed hard. "They want truth." "How?" He gestured at the faceless beings. Their stretched limbs. Their whispering forms. "How do you speak to something that isn't even human?" Wind Daughter stepped forward. "You don't speak," she said. "You survive." The ground beneath them rippled. A pulse of dark energy. And the forest bent inward. As if the trees were leaning to watch. A witness drifted closer. Its form trembling in slow waves. When it opened its mouth, a void widened. Darker than night. Hungrier than death. The first question. The voice came from everywhere. From the sky. The dirt. Inside their skulls. What is a life worth? Wind Daughter didn't hesitate. Everything. But the witness ignored her. It pointed. Slowly, accusingly. At her husband. "You. Answer." His throat tightened. I don't know what you want." A second witness glided forward. Its fingers unraveling into a haze of black dust. "You were a slave." It hissed. "Men died so you could live." Her husband flinched. Wind Daughter stepped between them. But the shadows surged. Forcing her back. Without touching her. This was his trial. Not hers. He stood trembling. But not backing away. "I didn't ask for those men to die," he said. His voice cracked. But his spine did not. "I didn't choose violence." A witness leaned closer. Its head twisting at an unnatural angle. "But you benefited from it." He swallowed. "Because she saved me." He pointed at Wind Daughter. "She made the choice. Not for glory. Not for revenge. For love." The witnesses hissed softly. Like steam rising from a frozen lake. Another question split the air. "And what would you give?" "To repay the debt of 5 lives." His breath shuddered. He looked at her. And she could see it in his eyes. A willingness that terrified her. "Don't," she whispered. "Whatever you're thinking. Don't." But he stepped forward. "I would give anything," he said. "Anything except her." The forest reacted instantly. Branches snapped overhead. The earth trembled violently. A sound like 1,000 dry leaves whispering at once surged through the trees. The witnesses turned their heads toward Wind Daughter, as if evaluating her next. One raised its hand. The second question? The temperature plunged. The cold slicing into their lungs. Making every breath burn. "Will you kill again to keep him?" Wind Daughter's heart slammed against her ribs. Not because she didn't know the answer. but because she knew it too well. She stepped forward, tomahawk glinting with red dawn light that refused to brighten. "Yes," she said, her voice steady, clear, unapologetic. The witnesses recoiled. Not from disgust, but interest. The shadows thickened around them, circling, tightening. Her husband grabbed her arm. "Wind, don't." His voice was raw. "They're twisting it. They want you to say that." She didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed locked on the creatures. "I will kill for him," she repeated. "But I won't kill for you." The forest froze. So did the witnesses. Wind Daughter continued, each word like a blade. "I kill to protect. Not to pay debts. Not to balance scales twisted by old magic." The witnesses leaned in, listening, hungry for truth. "And if you demand his life," she said, raising her tomahawk, "I will take yours." A shockwave tore through the clearing. A burst of unseen force. And even the witnesses staggered. The forest's breath halted. Everything waited. Then, slowly, terrifyingly, the wooden masked figure from the night before stepped out from between the witnesses. Not summoned. Not invited. Returning. Its voice slid like a blade through silk. The third question. The sky cracked again, splitting wider, bleeding more red light. "What will you sacrifice to end this?" The ground began to shake. The witnesses stirred. The mask tilted. The trial entered its final stage. And neither Wind Daughter nor her husband had any idea what the forest expected them to give.